Okay, so hello and welcome to the first 2020 episode for the Interhacktives Podcast. Bear with us, it's our first one, so we're figuring stuff out, but we have for our first episode Head of Audience Growth and also City alumni and guest lecturer Sarah Marshall.
Hi,
welcome.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for coming before the lecture. I know it's probably out of your way and out of your day, so thank you very much. So I guess kicking things off, just tell us about audience growth at Vogue.
So I've been doing audience growth at Vogue for the past 3 years. So Vogue is a 127-year-old, I think, institution where it started publishing print, as we all know it. It reached just quite a small population, 1,000 subscribers in the early days of the print magazine. And of course, that was what Vogue was great at, just reaching the class of people, not the mass. That was Conde Nast, who later bought Vogue, his kind of mantra, class, not mass. Now, fast forward 120 years to the internet, and obviously that changes. We need to reach a large audience online to be meaningful, and we need to tell brilliant stories. In order to do that, it's the stories that are important. So I joined because I saw an opportunity of really growing what Vogue is online. I work closely with 10 Vogues around the world, including British, Japan, Vogue Russia, and so I'm in this lovely position where kind of thinking about how we can grow all of their web audiences, their engagement on platforms like Instagram, which of course is a beautiful marriage for a brand like Vogue.
Amazing. And why was it Vogue? I mean, like you said, the opportunity came to you, but I'm sure for audience growth, there's so many other platforms that you could have gone to and maybe arguably expanded even more. So why was it like a fashion brand that attracted you?
So I never would have dreamt that I would have ended up working for Vogue and a fashion brand. So I previously worked at the Wall Street Journal, a subscriber publication, and so a lot of that audience development, which I did then online, was not only growing the overall audience, but really growing loyals, which would then turn into people who might pay. It's actually very, very similar at Vogue. We're not just trying to grow the size of the audience, and we're well on the way to doubling it over a 3-year period. What we need to do is we also need to bring people back frequently. And what we found, even though we've got 8% of our audience is loyal, they deliver about half the page views. So they see more advertising, they were more likely to watch a video, more likely to give us an email address, which of course then we form that direct relationship. So I was totally taken out of my comfort zone, much more comfortable with kind of business news, business journalism, and thrown into this world of fashion journalism, but really kind of using those same tools of thinking about evergreen content and that basis for a site beyond the daily stories that kind of get a small peak, those that kind of get a peak and traffic every day of the year if done right. So the challenge was given to me, and at that stage the Vogues needed a lot of work. They were quite small audiences. They were often companion sites to the magazines. I think it's fair some of them were, and now what we've done is really made digital really important to the future of the brand.
Would you say that digital's more important than maybe the print for Vogue now?
I think both are important differently, and what's really nice as well to be able to think 360, as everybody calls it, when we're doing, whether it's a cover story, whether it's a video, what feeds what and which platforms it's relevant for, and how we give people direction to shoot so that it can be cut square or vertical or horizontal, and really thinking about those changing needs, but really trying to make the most of every platform and make the content sing on every platform and kind of find the right audiences.
In terms of traditional journalism, how do you think that that's prepared you for audience growth? Because it's the same field but quite different. You're looking at analytics and metrics, whereas you've got traditional journalism that doesn't do that. So how did and also your MA here, how did that all prep you for what you do now?
So I trained as a journalist, I worked as a journalist, I worked kind of a local reporter and then various beats. And I think if you don't have that journalism background and that understanding of stories and content strategy, you can't really do audience growth. Yeah, you can get really good at SEO and kind of game it. You can get really good at social strategy, but really, unless you can think editorially, because it's the stories that matter. We can kind of polish the edges and think about how to bring, how to really change a story so it works for SEO. But really, without meaningful, impactful, original stories, you really haven't got a future or an audience to develop.
Would you say that Vogue's maybe changed its branding? Like, I always associated it with just fashion, and now, especially online, it's much more evergreen content. Do you think that's just key now? Like, there has to be that content. It's not just the fashion side of it.
I think it's broader, and I think, you know, you only have to look at the past decade to see all these different trends and things that have become important to people's lives, that some of which have come up perhaps through Instagram. Things like wellness are so important to particularly women today. You know, what the Me Too movement means for women today, feminism, and all of those different things. I think is right that it has its place. You know, Vogue is often, not always, has often been a place where it talks about so much more than fashion. Back, you know, during the war, there was kind of reportage, and it's not necessarily away from what it has been. Yes, it started as a society magazine for ladies, really about fashion. It's gone through periods where it's very, very fashion focused. Fashion is still at the heart, but you always get these different strands and different things that the core audience is interested in.
I was going to ask a question about Vogue's business model, because you mentioned before that you were working at a publication that was mostly focused on subscriptions and increasing the number of loyals. What is Vogue's relative business model compared to that? Is it more advertisement? Is that where the money comes from?
It's really diverse, and one of the reasons that I was put in place was really to build that diverse business. So in order to do any of the things you might want to do in the future as a publisher, and all, you know, publishers are dipping their toes into all these things, you know, events, e-commerce and affiliate linking, experiential, all of these different things, then, or, you know, custom solutions or advertising or selling more magazines, all of those you need bigger audiences online. You then need to develop those audiences, get them to come back more frequently in order to do any of those things. So I was really brought in for the first piece of the puzzle, and grow the big funnel, as it's quite an ugly term, but and then kind of drive. Then we've got enough people who love Vogue, who are the right kind of people who might then want to buy a training course in how to become a fashion designer or whatever. So it's kind of, it's a diverse revenue model, more diverse than it perhaps was in the days of pure print. So it's kind of leaning into many things, and you know, Conde Nast also has online subscription products like Vanity Fair and Wired and New Yorker in the States do have a muted wall.
Do you think that it's because of your sort of diversified revenue streams that you have you ever been tempted to do the whole clickbaity style, just get quick hits for like short stories, easy money sort of thing? Have you ever been tempted to do that, or is that something you've been put off by?
I think it's, you know, Vogue, you're having a certain expectation of the brand to be of super high quality, so never at the face of the brand. So until recently, I was also overseeing audience development for the GQs internationally, and I think therefore there I can probably give you a better example where we've had in the past some content where it's, you know, we'll be speaking about women, or, you know, showing images online which in this day look really dated.
To a corridor, but it'll be fine.
There's never any room at this university.
No. Friday afternoon. So, where were we? You were talking about... What were you talking about, Fergus?
Business models at Vogue, and if you've ever been... basically clickbait, is that something you've ever been tempted by? I think that's where we were at, anyway.
So I think Vogue's, of course, everybody gets tempted by clickbait at times. You see the metrics and you're like, oh, suddenly a story that has worked. But we're really, really conscious of not just bringing in the wrong type of readers, or the readers who won't ever go on to be loyals. What's the point of just kind of attracting a large audience if we can't turn those into regular readers? So you might get a story. We had a story last week or the week before where it got 1.3 million uniques, which is a lot for us. It was about Priyanka Chopra. She's, you know, everybody's like obsessed with her, particularly in India right now. And again, you know, it's kind of how to tell stories in the right way. That story was a good example of probably we had lots of people just coming to us once because it was a very particular look she had on that day. But at the same time, I think that we'd always push to ensure that we had those stories you'd expect of Vogue. And one of the things, the area I'm based in is a part of the organisation called Vogue Global Network, and we're new-ish, we're an editorial team in London, and we commission centrally and supply some of the stories that you see on the Vogue websites. Now, the reason we do that is because things like top talent, it's much easier to negotiate on behalf of the 26 Vogues than one or two when you're talking digital only. So what some of the stories that we commission, we know they're not going to get bumper traffic. We know that they're not going to bring in 1.3 million uniques. But at the same time, it just makes sense for us to do. We have to, we're just at the start of Fashion Month, London Fashion Week, and then New York first. And then, there's some designer interviews that we just have to do, and they will bring in some audience, and those audiences are those that are more likely to kind of convert into people who'll come regularly. So it's a balance, but you just always have to keep your eye on the quality, right. and we're not sites to talk about rumour. Where Vogue's always been a positive place, so it doesn't talk about diets. It just always talked about positivity, etc. So it's kind of still staying true to that core.
I think that's very encouraging, because it can be obviously very easy and very profitable to sort of do those sorts of negative pieces. And I think it's good that Vogue, given the reputation and the clout that it has, that it doesn't try to invest itself in that sort of stuff. Is your role? Do you interact with the other branches of Conde Nast as well, or do you have any experience with the social desks at the other magazines? Is the process any different at say New Yorker or Wired or?
So it's all relatively similar. So until last year, it was two very separate companies. We were there was Conde Nast in the US and Conde Nast International, which was kind of everything outside US. I worked for the Conde Nast International. We're now going through an integration process, so coming much closer. We've always had good relationships so we always had an understanding of how the audience teams would work there and how they'd have, not dissimilarly, there's a central audience team with SEO expertise, there's social expertise, and then there's embeds in each of the publications. So for example, GQ or Vogue will have an embedded audience team member and audience editor who will report through the central team, but for all intents and purposes they work for the brand, they work for Vogue, or they work for GQ, or they work for the New Yorker.
That seems like a particularly nuanced approach to, because it's important you have a consistent branding across all of Conde Nast, but it's good that these other branches are allowed to be their own brand as well in a way, in a sense. I suppose that can be quite hard to manage. Yes.
But I guess also with Vogue, it's a specialism, isn't it? Like, you're not going to get the reader of any magazine going to Vogue. Like, it's going to be people that are interested in fashion, maybe have a job in fashion. So going back to the idea of like clickbait and being tempted to post that kind of thing, that's not kind of your audience, I'm guessing. Like, your audience is much more they're niche, like they're there because they know what you're talking about. Whereas a lot of people, like, we all know who Gucci is and what their bags look like, but we can't tell you anything else about them. But then your audience can, and that's why clickbait probably doesn't work for your branding, but it does for other magazines in other areas. So I guess that's...
So there is a core fashion audience, absolutely, but it also, we are... that fashion audience is kind of probably too small to really, we need to think beyond that, which is why we do make sure we do things like SEO and rank for things like if people are searching best mascara or designer sunglasses or fashion trends 2020 or jeans trends 2020, we would rank for them, so that they may not be the core fashionista audience, but there is actually there's an incredible number of people who are asking those questions. And something like street style, which is a phenomenon which is perhaps like 15 or 20 years old, then the amount of user interaction about uniques and page views we get for people wanting to look at other people wearing street style, I don't think they are all core fashion people. It's a wider audience thing.
Sure.
I mean, whenever I Google best hair products for blonde hair, like Vogue is always up there, and I'll always click on it. So it is people like me looking for that specific thing that they know you'll have. But again, it's knowing that your brand is supplying that information. So it is still like a wider niche, but I guess it is still like a niche of people that go there.
And we're speaking, of course, on the Friday before the Oscars on the Sunday, and so one of the things we've been doing as well is ensuring that, I sent an email this morning ensuring that everybody was checking their, what we're calling the parent page, the everything you need to know about the Oscars, checking people were ranking for it, checking they'd updated the story, checking they remembered to update it on Sunday night when they're so busy pulling in images, doing analysis of the red carpet looks. But really, without that kind of attention to SEO, loads of people on Monday morning will be coming in, right, and Googling red carpet Oscars, but you have to do the pre-work, you have to have a look, you have to do the work on SEO. We published that story in October or November, gave it time to rank. I was looking at it this morning, it was kind of bubbling up in all the different Vogues around the world, but that pre-work is required from that parent article to then link it to the other stories that we do on the night about the key moments, the best dressed, etc., or the red carpet dresses. So we kind of have to do all that, and without somebody like me doing that strategic stuff behind the scenes, then it's just kind of firing off stories and seeing where they land.
It's the ether, yeah.
Exactly. Whereas if you can properly plan these big events, big tentpole events, you can end up with really large audiences, and they're really important for the brand. It's really important that Vogue is known as a place that comments, that brings you the red carpet dresses, or the...
And something like the Oscars is such a goldmine for you. Like, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I was also, so we don't have too terribly much time left, but I was just going to ask you one question, is that sometimes doing the social media work can be very draining, because it's not like traditional journalism where you write your story and it's done and there's that feeling of completeness. There's this constant iterative process. So is there ever any sense of like burnout, I guess?
I think there's burnout for journalists at all levels. I don't think now any story is done. I think online, a good journalist will follow that story, will reopen it, they'll respond to comments, they'll think about where to take it next. Your story used to end when you filed it to editors who put it in a print publication. Now the process is continuous. It's up to you to help find the audience for that, to build the audience around you as the anchor for that news area. So I think there is the risk of burnout for journalists everywhere. And yes, social is a 24/7 operation, and most of our audience is online. They're in the evenings, they're at weekends, they're when newsrooms traditionally have fewer staff or no staff. So this is really kind of flipped things on its head, if you like, and I think there is a risk of kind of complete burnout for a lot of people, and the need to really have trusting, well-organised schedules to mean that you can do handoffs so that you can hand off where you were to the next team who would take over.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. We want to do a format where we ask you to end the podcast with a piece of advice you would give to a journalist. So very briefly, what would your advice be?
It's really obvious. The piece of advice I would give to a journalist is kind of staying curious, reading around the subject, not only your key subject that you are reporting on, but really understanding where journalism's going, understanding how the other publications that are doing well, understanding the business models, really staying fresh in that area is how you will stay fresh, how you will stay ahead, how you will, it's lifelong learning these days in every field, but never more so than journalism. And you can't just rely on your employers to update you. You have to do it for yourself and go out there and read every day and follow news every day that is around the business of journalism and not just your beat.
Read, everyone.
Yeah, read news.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hopefully we will be back next week. We have a few guests lined up.
To be revealed.
To be revealed.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes, exactly. Very exciting. A sequel hook, if you will. A cliffhanger. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
We will see you, hopefully. We won't see you.
No.
But you'll hear us, hopefully, a bit later down the line. Thank you very much.
Thank you.